Ugh, summer allergies, spring allergies, whatever season it is. I've known for years that the solution to my lumber woes, my pile of firewood that lays in the back of my shop, I've known for years that the solution to that was to build a lumber rack, obviously. But for whatever reason, I've just never been enthusiastic about building one. I've had 5 years of accumulated lumber sitting around in the back, hogging up all the space I could be using to store beer or other important things. And thus far, I've never done anything about it. Well, it turns out that, like so many other instances in my life, the solution for this is to get started, and then the enthusiasm follows, which is what happened in my case. And you can kind of see the mess in the background that I'm trying to solve. All this crap laying everywhere. Just no real place to put boards, and no real organization either. And a complete waste of space. So I started with some rectangular tube that I actually bought to build some running boards for my truck. And then I lost enthusiasm for that project for some reason. Ironically, or maybe not ironically, depending on your understanding of the word, this angle that I'm about to use here is part of the problem, part of the big mess here. This is some pretty substantial stock that I got from work. They were installing overhead cranes, huge overhead cranes, and this was left over from the rail system that the crane is riding on now. So I snatched it up and have been wondering what to use it for ever since. Well, here's my chance. This stuff is definitely overkill. No need to use angle that's quite this thick, but one thing that is an advantage to having the heavy metal on the base is that all the mass of the project is on the bottom, or a lot of it anyway. At least until you start putting lumber on there. So I'm going to cap these rectangular pieces. This is my method of doing it. I used to cut the rectangular or square tube, and then I would bevel the edges so that there was a place for the metal to go. But invariably, I would get done capping, and there's still voids in there for some reason. So what I started doing is I don't bevel the edges. I just kind of tack the cap in place on two sides, and then I take the grinding wheel, and I create a trough that's as deep as I want it to be, a place for the metal to go. And that's one of the beautiful things about welding is that you're putting molten metal in there, so you're basically making this as if it had been grown this way. Super cool. And I'm kind of zapping it here instead of doing one steady bead because I was a bit shy about burning through. This is only 1/8 inch wall, so got that trough, and now I'm just going to fill it in. By this point, I'd realized that I wasn't going to burn through. It's a better penetration this way anyway. And now I'm going to switch to a flap disc, or a tiger paw as we call them at work. Rawr. And I'm going to do that to all four ends. Try to make this as seamless as possible. It just adds a finished look that I like. It adds a lot of time too, but well worth it, I think. So now I'm tacking in these cross pieces, these overbuilt, overly thick cross pieces. I have no regrets though. And I'm going to weld them out. Now I'm going to use one of my most expensive marking tools to draw a radius here so that there's kind of a nice smooth transition from the angle to the square tube, aesthetically speaking. Once you put lumber on this rack, you're not going to see these, but I'll know they're there. It's like you could make this as utilitarian and formless, shapeless as possible, as you want to. But I think that even utility projects in the shop, you can try things that you've wanted to try, techniques, that you wanted to try. And actually, that's the best time to try them because the stakes are lower. You try new things. Every project, even a utility project, can be a building, like a skill building experience. Why not, huh? And this is how we improve. This is how we improve our skills. So that's the approach I take no matter what it is I'm building, even if it's, my wife always gets on me about it. It doesn't have to be nice. I'm like, well, yes and no. I wouldn't call this nice, but I would call it definitely more refined than it needed to be. But, you spend a lot of time in the shop. It means I'm going to look at this project a lot. I might as well not hate myself every time I look at it. So I've done the math on this. There's an ongoing debate in the comments section and with my dad. What does he know, huh? About whether to weld or bolt casters on. And I'm of the opinion that welding is the better option. You can slap them on there super quick compared to if you had to drill a bunch of holes, number one. Number two, you're not really saving any time, like if you have to change the casters down the road, because the bolts on caster plates don't always line up anyway. It's not like there's one milling machine that drills all the holes in the same place, on the actual caster, I mean. Also, I don't like to see a bunch of bolts and nuts. If I have to take all the lumber off at some point and re-weld casters on there, they're pretty easy to cut off. I mean, you can cut a caster off if you tack it, which is what I do. Unless it's a 2,000-pound caster or something. But stuff like this, it's just a few tacks, 6 tacks, I think, per caster. That's pretty easy to cut off if you put the tacks in a strategic place. Don't put it in the corner where you can't reach it. You can make some amazing things with a couple of marking and measuring tools, like a combination square, a tape measure, some soapstone or a marker, a grinder, and a welder. It is unbelievable what you can make with that. Yes, it is nice to have chop saws. I mean, as I demonstrated earlier in this video, the chop saw is a very accurate way of cutting, and it provides a very almost burnished looking surface on the end, whatever piece you cut. But those things are conveniences. They're not necessary to build something that's truly nice. And don't let the fact that you don't have $50,000 in equipment fool you into thinking that you're not capable of making something truly amazing. No, you are. Really, whatever you can imagine, you can build with these basic tools. You'll see, like I joked about earlier in the video, sometimes I draw radiuses with just found objects in the shop, like cutting wheels or, depending on the size radius. I've used bottle caps before. I started building with wood 30 years ago, and I remember being so excited. All I could think about was woodworking. I mean, I would daydream it. It was hard to concentrate on anything else. I was always thinking about what I could build next. And I would go to sleep at night thinking about, what next project could I build? And how am I going to do this particular operation that I want to do? How will I do that? Just all encompassing. And I got involved with woodworking much later, really not that long ago, about 5 years ago, probably. It started with welding, and then that turned to fabricating. Welding and fabricating don't automatically go hand in hand. I've known welders that spent their entire career, 40-year career, and never had a welder, never owned a welding machine, which is quite amazing to me. I remember asking a guy that was the director of the welding department at the school that I went to, the welding school I went to, when I found out he had a 40-year career and he never owned a welding machine. I was just astonished at that, and I asked him about it, and he's like, well, the last thing I wanted to do after 10 or 12 hours of welding was do some more welding. And I mean, I have to admit, I can understand that sentiment. That hasn't been the case for me. I mean, we work 10-hour shifts, and I'm still excited about welding. It's just such a cool process. I mean, I'm constantly thinking while I'm welding how amazing this is, that you have something that's so powerful that you can meld two pieces of metal together, and you can, if you want to, you can grind it smooth and make it appear, and for all intents and purposes be, as if the pieces grew together. This is how they were formed. That's really amazing, and the possibilities with that are pretty endless. I love woodworking. Welding is much the same, or fabricating, I should say, is much the same, but it's not the same. If you, like I showed a little bit earlier in the video, you can get it all weld it out, and then you can refine it with the grinder. And then if you realize, oh man, I need to add a little more metal, guess what? Just like that, you can add a little more metal and then grind it smooth, and it's as if it was born that way. You might think, well, I'm not a welder. This is beyond the scope of what I have and what I'm really willing to do, and that's fine. I mean, there's other ways to do this, obviously. I remember being intimidated when I knew I wanted to get into welding. Stick welding was a whole lot easier to get into because all you got to do is buy a box of stick electrodes and a stick welder. Well, wire-fed processes are a little more involved because you've got to get, unless your machine comes with a wire feeder, which mine didn't, you've got to get a wire feeder, you've got to get the shielding gas, you've got to get the wire, you've got to know what shielding gas you're supposed to use. What I did was I went to, I think it was ARC 3, and I just kind of threw myself on the mercy of the court, so to speak. Went to the guys at the counter and I just said, hey, I'm an idiot. Can you make me less of an idiot and just tell me where to start? Just to be, those guys, you may be intimidated by that, but those guys are just dying to help you, really. So if you're wondering where to start and you don't even know, that's a good place. I'm about to do these 32 support pieces, which are about 10-inch long pieces of square tube, same square tube as I'm using here. And, this was definitely tedious. So what I could have done is I could have just cut these and drill a couple holes and then be done with them. But like I said before, I don't like there to be exposed ends of square tube in my projects that haven't been capped. So I went through the pain and the very tedious process of making caps for all of them. Cut 32 caps for every one of these and then did my little process. These 32 little bars are kind of an allegory for anything important that's worth doing in life, I'd say. It's just something that maybe at times you've got to endure for the payoff at the end. It's these extremely repetitive tasks that take forever, and so you go away a little bit in your mind. That's my technique. And then from a distance, way off in your mind, you can hear every now and then a little voice that says, are we almost done yet? Nope. Okay, back to my little cave in my mind, off in the distance somewhere. I've heard people say that they don't have the patience for that. I don't have the patience to do that, mainly regarding woodworking or something of that nature. And I think that it's worth us doing, being able to endure those tedious tasks. And in fact, to achieve anything with any level of mastery requires these mundane steps. That's just the way it is. You might as well have kind of at least a neutral attitude about it, knowing that there's going to be a payoff in the end. I mean, it can be hard to sit in a practice room all day practicing scales or rudiments, but that's a necessary part of becoming a great drummer or a great, clarinet player or whatever it is you play. And yeah, honestly, it was a struggle to motivate myself to do all those. But I know I would have looked at the thing as the years go by, as I sat in my shop and wished I'd capped them, as I knew I should. And so you might as well just bite the bullet and take care of business. So this is kind of the process. These are self-tapping screws, which you can get at any hardware store. I've already pre-drilled the holes because this is pretty thick metal. These are actually designed to where you don't have to drill holes, but they're also not designed for thick metal like this. So I got some pilot holes, and then the self-tapping end there does the rest of the work and really cuts down on the time that it would have cost me to tap every one of these holes and put a screw in there. And again, these wood pieces are not absolutely necessary either, but they lend a nice warmth to the project to offset the cold steel, I guess. And they also are soft, so that with a piece of wood, if I slap a piece of wood on there carelessly, the metal is not going to dent the wood all up. And cutting the pieces for the top, and I'm putting a round over on there with my legendary 690 router that's about 30 years old now. Still going strong. I expect this thing will outlast me. Only thing I've had to do is put a cord on there because the cord dry rotted a little bit. I cut little dog ears in the plywood that I'm attaching here on the corners with the bandsaw. So now I got the finished project here, and completely overbuilt, I know, but I don't care. It's a piece of shop furniture that I'm going to look at until I die, and so worth doing, worth overbuilding is my conclusion. I have no regrets on this. And now we're going to load it up. I have no idea what this thing weighs now with all the wood on it. Probably 500 pounds, I would say. These are 300-pound casters, so total weight of 1,200 pounds is what their capacity is. You kind of want your lumber stash to be located logically in relation to whatever the first machine is that you're going to use. I also don't want to have to go all the way to the back of the shop to store the lumber. Just for example, if I bring home a 4x8 sheet of plywood, I don't want to have to walk that thing through the obstacle course of my shop to store out on the far wall. It makes more sense to have it out on the front, and then when I need to take it to the table saw, it's a very logical, easy step from the lumber cart to the table saw. Just as a reminder, this is what the shop looked like before I started with this project. And now I can finally clean again. It's not every single time I build something that I'm extremely happy with the result, but this is one of those cases. I look over at this thing now and I'm like, man, this is awesome. I cannot believe it took me this long to build it. Not only do I have an area in the back that's completely clear of debris now, but all my lumber is easily accessible. It's very visible. It's stacked at the most 4 or 5 boards high. So it's not like I have to cast away 300 boards to get to the one on the bottom. I can see everything that I need to see. I hope this helps you in some small way. Maybe it gives you some idea how to customize a lumber rack for your own shop and needs. In the meantime, it's time for you to go and build something awesome.